Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's edition of Blumira Briefings, your weekly download of the week's most important headlines to you with additional context, because that's our specialty. I'm Zoe Lindsay. I'm joined here today by a interesting panel. We've got a reunion between former teammates Jay Goulet and Amanda Berlin.
And
And returning to visit us this week, Nick Dixon is back as well.
Nick's
Hey
also
everyone.
used to be, on the same team as me. Very,
It's,
very
True.
early on, in the Blue Mirror history.
Yes,
I don't
some
know if I
Blumira
knew that.
OGs. Yeah.
Mhm.
See, now I'm getting news and lore all in one meeting. This is great.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we've got a lot to cover this week. Right up top, today we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. Today, both the M-Trends report on trending threats from Mandiant, as well as the Verizon data breach investigations report, both dropped. I will include the links for them in the description because I think both of these are great resources to look at. We are not going to be covering them in depth today because I want to make sure that we are able to actually review those and take away the most salient facts before we try and summarize it for you. I did get to look at some of the highlights of the M Threats report. One interesting trend was that stolen creds have moved up to second place in most common vectors, right behind exploits, now becoming more popular than phishing or social engineering captured creds. Top industries that were targeted: financial tech, professional services, tech, which I think has some overlap with professional services, and then gov and healthcare rounding out that top five. And the medium dwell time that they were seeing was 11 days, up to 26 when getting an external notification, and 5 when the attackers were notified. Uh, Attackers are more aggressively going after centralized auth sources like single sign-on portals. And there are some good basic best practices, following best practices for vulnerability management, principle of least privilege, using hardening practices, using strong auth. And then, we love to see investing in detection and IR planning. So we will include those links. It's not going to be in our deep analysis lineup of stories this week, but I'm sure that we'll be referencing back to it in the coming weeks. One more quick announcement. Next week is going to be the RSA conference in San Francisco. So we will not have a briefings next Friday because I am going to be out there myself and not able to produce it. So with all of that out of the way, let's dive right into the top threats, suspects, and risks of the week. So running through the top few threats that we've seen over the last week, we had a slight dip, but still taking the top spot was Sophos blocked websites. A bigger drop from the previous week, almost half down in Sentinel-1 unmitigated suspicious threat alerts. And then closing out that top three, we had failed single-factor PowerShell auth attempt. Uh, Nick, I think you had some thoughts on some of these top 10 that we saw in the threats category.
Yeah, and I'm just now seeing the massive dip from Sentinel-1 and CrowdStrike in their detections. I'm trying to think if there was a widespread false positive, but I'll have to get back to you on that. But yeah, a lot of these top ones are things that we're surfacing from EDRs, MDRs. But some that stand out to me are number three, Azure failed single factor PowerShell auth attempt. A lot of these are mitigated with conditional access policies. So we're seeing a lot of customers or people out exposing this Azure CLI command line and allowing people from all over the world to try and log in. So that's where we see a lot of that stuff. So just getting conditional access policies in place to stop people that you don't want logging in or attempting to log in to your infrastructure. Number four, risky sign-ins. That's usually related to travel activity of legitimate employees, but we also catch people that signed on in Minnesota, let's say, and then 3 hours later we see a log on attempt from Germany. So that's when that detection triggers in our platform most of the time. And then number 9, remote desktop server password spray. Usually that's exposed servers on the internet, kind of similar to the Azure CLI, PowerShell detection. And again, that's something you can do with an old software fail to ban. I'm sure some of us have heard of that, as well as conditional access policy. So those are the ones that stuck out to me on the threat side of things.
Yeah, and just to note on that risky sign-ins one, the Azure risky sign-ins is useful in its own right, but sometimes it can also be a really good detection to back up some of the other findings that you're having. If you
Hmm.
see something that's just like you have a finding that's tied to a user, but you need a little bit more evidence to really like take action on that user. Sometimes you can even see that user just chilling out as already having a risky sign-in event, and then that kind of like seals the deal. So that can be a good like backup or confirmation that something bad's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jake, we had talked about this on the briefings last week, but you picked out as well this week that once again, I think we're seeing what, one, two, three remote access tools in here. Can I not count?
Yeah, in the suspects.
Yeah, as we move
Yeah.
down to suspects here.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought it was we've got multiple. These aren't the only three remote access tool detections we have, but I just thought it was funny that in the top 10 we had three taking over the spot as it is. So we had Splash Top coming in at number 2, and then TeamViewer at number 6, and Log Me In at number 8. So obviously those things are used by legitimate people all the time, but at the same time they're also abused by threat actors. So a lot of times, in the previous environments that I've managed, it can be sometimes like you might get those false positives here and there, but typically people, if you have users reporting to you, typically they're going to be reaching out to you to get things started. It's very unlikely that the users, at least the places I worked at, they're not going to reach out to people directly to start a log me in chat or something. So usually it's more suspicious when I'm left out of the conversation, then all of a sudden I get this log me in, or especially Splash Top. Splash Top is not one that's typically used by like legitimate like support companies, and is more typically associated with like threat actors, or even I think a Terra RMM agent would is deploys Splash Top by default. So which is another thing that's suspicious. If you're a company that doesn't use a Terra, then it should be weird that an Atera Splash Top detection is coming up in your environment.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Matt had said last week, admins oftentimes will use these tools because they're quick to set up and easy to use, and attackers are fond of these tools because they're quick to set up and easy to use. So if you are going to have one of these in use, his recommendation last week is make sure that you have alignment on which you're going to be using and stick to it. So at the very least, you're able to quickly identify when one that doesn't match up with that starts to show up.
Yeah,
You have
and on
less
top of
to
that, they
worry.
don't. Oh,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead, Amanda.
This is you have less to worry about securing too, because all of those tools also have their own out of band like updates and things that you have to keep track of that are security patches. And it's so much better if you can just pick one and kind of stick in a lane, and as opposed to having to support all of those too.
Yeah, and they don't. These things are legitimate. They're not going to trigger EDR, AV alerts. So this is one of those perfect cases where us like a platform like Blumira focusing on techniques and behaviors rather than like just signatures, which is what AV is technically focused on. Because if you have just traditional AV that's just watching for bad files, it's not going to trigger off of anything with Splashtop. It's going to let LogMeIn through. It's designed to allow those things through. But when we focus on techniques and behaviors, when we're watching for these weird tools popping up in your environment, that may be a red alert. So yeah, that's an important thing to stay focused on techniques rather than just necessarily like bad viruses.
Absolutely. And just to run through the rest of those top suspects for the week, at number 1, we had batch script execution. Number 2 was, as mentioned, Splashtop. Number 3 was Microsoft 365 Impossible Travel Alert. And then number 4, and Nick, you picked this out. We had two, no, more than two, No, two here. Clear text password alerts on a local system by process in number 4 and on local system by file write on number 10.
Yeah, so these things, like Jake said, they aren't always bad. Some people have the word password in a file name, and it's password protected, but they are worth calling out, and they do help companies lock down their environments by saying, "Hey, user, maybe it's not a great idea to keep your banking password along with our domain admin password in a file." So we see that all the time. Customers reaching out, being like, "Hey, thank you so much for detecting this. We just deleted that file off the user machine." So um, those are great things to investigate. I will call out too just the fact that these suspects are things that always need a little further investigation. They're not always sound the alarm. It's let's dig through the logs and figure out what's going on most of the time. So just looking at this list, I can confidently say that these findings are the reasons for most of our questions from customers. So definitely looking to help customers better themselves, better security through these suspects.
Right. Yeah, and we do so in these top trends. The reason why we do threats and suspects and risks is because we want to make sure that we're giving you a holistic kind of understanding. A threat isn't the only thing that can potentially affect whether the business runs smoothly. So, if you're getting that visibility from across the environment, try and be able to identify those issues before they become problems too. Speaking of risks, our top few for this week, Microsoft 365 auth outside of US, Google Workspace potential clear text password, SMB connection from a public IP. We see that one pretty much every week. And SharePoint 100 or more file deletions in 15 minutes. So I think like several of these, SMB connection from public IP, auth outside of US, 100 or more file deletions, all of these are ones that we have kind of across different services and platforms that can pop up in risks. Why do we include those?
Yeah, so the at least the authentication outside of US. So we had Microsoft 365 auth outside of US as the number one spot, like you said, and then also the Google Workspace uh, login from outside of the US as like number 10 on this list this week. We're seeing those and those ones are on the list and they're important to monitor because they not because they always point to malicious activity. You could always have somebody traveling. There could be many reasons. You could have a satellite office outside of the US. There's plenty of reasons people could be authenticating outside of the US. But the thing is that those people don't typically change that often. So usually it's like a very quick, like just check, like, should this person be doing this? So like it's a low effort. Usually it's a low effort investigation for whoever is taking a look at that for potentially high reward in terms of like and then in terms of reward for a defender, like potentially blocking an attack. So it's like low effort, just seeing if like just knowing if somebody should be outside of the US is like doesn't take that much thought, or like knowing about what's going on in your environment, but it could potentially prevent a lot of things going on. And then additionally, like I said, that list of people authenticating outside of US doesn't change that often. So it can be usually pretty easy to keep like a list of people who are approved, and continuing to monitor that, and then you can put in filters so that you're only being detected on like new people and other people that you haven't approved to be outside of the US.
Shifting into our updates news. This story from Bleeping Computer talking about a critical Erlang OTP bug for SSH that now has public exploits. Patch is available now. So this was a remote code execution vulnerability. CVE will be linked in the description, 2025 32433. It allowed connection protocol messages pre-auth, which obviously is not going to be something that you want to see. There are, at this point, several researchers that have developed working exploits, one of which we're going to talk about a little bit later today. And according to Shodan, there were over 600,000 IP addresses running Erlang OTP's implementation of SSH. The main reason that I grabbed this story is this Bleeping Computer article was great about clarifying what specifically was affected. I saw several other headlines saying public exploit available, pre-code pre-auth code execution to SSH. And I wanted to clarify because there's definitely a lot more than 600,000 people using SSH. What is Erlang OTP and what are we talking about in terms of this vulnerability?
Yeah, the like remote code execution, SSH, like these are all things that are like clickbait now. As annoying as it is,
I was
it,
gonna
it
say the
does get a lot
same
of people.
thing.
What's that,
I
Amanda?
was gonna say the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like there was like that Zen who was it? It wasn't Zendesk. It was Trend Micro. There's like the Trend Micro article that was from a few weeks ago that they had mentioned as that they had the article title was kind of like they had uncovered this new technique. It was super crazy and like people needed to get on it, but it was a technique that was like I think like 8 or 9 years old, and really the only thing the article was detailing was like that it was being abused more, which is important, but the way that it was written, the article title was written was just kind of clickbaity. Anyways, that's me off my soapbox about clickbaity articles.
No,
Um,
I'm right there with you because I'm reading
yeah,
a lot of headlines now.
it's tough. It's one of those things that I think even like no matter where you are in the industry, you got to kind of sift through those things, and those
Yeah.
clickbait articles don't make it any easier. Um, but I'll give a quick little description of Erlang just because I have it written down here and I have so it may seem a little robot the way I'm describing it, but Erlang, it's a programming language used to build massively scalable soft real-time systems with requirements on high availability. What that basically means is it's durable and it's very reliable, and this for that reason it's typically seen in usages for telecoms, banking, e-commerce, computer telephony, and instant messaging. And then additionally, OTP is just kind of like a set of libraries specific to Erlang. So I don't really get into too much more detail of that, but that's Erlang in a nutshell. And some examples that you may know of that are Erlang implementation are early versions of Facebook Messenger. I don't think they're on that anymore, at least from what I was seeing. And WhatsApp is also built on Erlang. Also, Pinterest, RabbitMQ, and some Cloudflare backend systems I was able to see we're still rolling on those. Um, and then, like I said, it's used where reliability and durability are key. So one example that I found was AdRoll. They use Erlang with live monitoring of their real-time bidding system. So that's where things need to be quick, reliable, and also there's a lot of money going through these things with like the way the bidding system works for them. So that can be potentially like a big target to upset that, and as we said, telecom as well, which is already a big target for APTs, as we've seen from Volt and Salt Typhoon as well. So
Yeah, it's nearly 40 years old, so you can venture to guess there's quite a bit of stuff on the internet that's built on this programming language.
Yeah, I was
Right.
reading all about like the high availability and like that's the main reason it was built, right?
Hmm.
Like fault tolerant, distributed, out there for forever. And I'm assuming a lot of the applications that it's on are on OT, like so operational technology that is maybe never gonna get touched and updated. So
Right.
I could see it. I mean, we see like XP stuff still on Shodan. So yeah, I bet you that'll be out there for a while.
Yeah, I loved the note in our prep doc here. It's older than almost everyone at Blumira, and I will happily take the plausible deniability that I count among that number. So let's just move right along. You know what? While we're talking about
I
SSH
said
security,
almost.
yeah, exactly. When we're talking about SSH and security, especially Jake, since we've got you on, what are some other ways that folks can try to identify if they have an attacker that's trying to exploit access through SSH?
yeah, and I wanted to be clear too, because I know we wanted to cover the point that Erlang and this SSH remote code execution, this doesn't affect everybody that's rolling
Yes.
SSH.
Thank you.
This is a very, very specific use case, and probably so specific that I doubt anybody listening is going to be affected
Right.
by the Erlang stuff. But just know that if you're running just like an open SSH server, this is not going to be one of those affected things. You have to be running specific implementation from Erlang. So to that point, I'll go over a few recommendations just for SSH in general, just because I think that's a little bit more applicable to most of the people listening. And really the key piece of advice, whether it's Erlang, whether it's OpenSSH, any kind of SSH you can imagine, SSH is designed to be somewhat open to the internet because it's just the way it's developed and the way it's secured. You should be trying to use policies to restrict to specific IP addresses and IP ranges. So a lot of the lab stuff or anything that we have internally here, we restrict it very, very specific IP addresses. So if you're on any other IP address, you won't even see SSH open on our end. Or if you do, then it won't let you authenticate no matter what because you're not on that list. Another key thing and this one's very basic, is just use SSH keys. Don't allow don't allow password auth. And more importantly, disable password auth. That's something that you would need to go into your SSH configuration to explicitly disable it. And this was mentioned early on in an article by Nick, or in our episode here by Nick, was the fail to ban. Fail to ban is something that's used in conjunction with SSH servers to help prevent brute force logins. So that's something that you'd also want to enable. You could also use what's known as like a bastion host or a jump server / VPN. So you're not exposing SSH directly to the internet. You've got another machine that's secured in its own ways, and then that machine gives you access to SSH. And then lastly, you've got IAM or zero trust tools, stuff like Google's IAP, which is Identity Aware Proxy. And you also have stuff like Azure's just-in-time permissions. So you're giving people permissions just when they need it and then taking them away when they don't need it. And that can be applied to SSH as well.
I just wanted to add, because I know we saw a lot of Shodan hits for this Erlang software or service. I would highly implore everyone listening to go into Shodan and type in whatever server they might know of in their environment. Type in the public IP of it, and see if it pops up. Fingers crossed it doesn't. I'm sure it won't. But if you wanted to even take a look at what I'm referring to, just type in Erlang into Shodan.io, and you can see nearly 800,000 hits of Erlang on the internet. So one little fun project if you're bored.
We love to have like a simple tip for every week, so I think that may be the one for this week.
Awesome.
Let's see. We've got a Cisco WebEx bug that let hackers get code execution through meeting invite links. So this was a high severity vulnerability. It was taking advantage of WebEx custom URL parser. It was allowing folks to send meeting invite links that would download arbitrary files. There is a good table showing which versions are affected, 44.5 and earlier, and 44.8 and later aren't. If you're on 44.6 or 7.7, the link to the article will be in the description. It's going to be a good breakdown in that table there for you. There has not been a report of active exploitation of this in the wild yet. However, this is a pretty busy month for Cisco, unfortunately. They've had a privilege escalation flaw in secure network analytics, and then a Nexus dashboard vulnerability for allowing unauthed attackers to enumerate LDAP user accounts. And then also a static credential vulnerability that exposed a built-in backdoor admin account and has been actively exploited. So we'll include those advisories to check out. If you're using any of those tools, make sure that you look at the mitigation measures and do those updates. Meeting links are going to be one of those things that are most commonly shared and received from outside the organization, kind of by the nature of the tool. So, this is somewhat different risks than a lot of things where we can simply say approved addresses or unapproved addresses, or you can't add these attachments. What can orgs do to kind of be aware of these sorts of attacks? Maybe not specific to meeting links, but that are more likely to target their outward-facing sales or customer-facing teams that have to have that communication externally.
Yeah, I was just wondering who just clicks on random meeting links that they don't
It's
like.
sales.
Who's joining meetings that you didn't like prep for or know the person that's inviting you? Yeah.
Yeah, I had that down as one of my notes too. I specifically said my bullet point says this is kind of a weird attack path.
Right.
Mostly because like it just exactly like you said, Amanda, like who's just like randomly joining. Like I don't even like if a meeting's on my calendar, like I'm usually afraid if I'm not even prepared for it, but who even clicks if they're A, not prepared and also don't know who they're meeting with? But I wanted to say, I wanted to make the bullet point here about saying like it's not like a typical infected file like a PDF or Excel, which is easy because it's you just click on it, open it. What is this about? You don't just join a meeting and be like, what is this meeting about? And just show up. So it not to say that it doesn't happen, but this is
That's how
like
I ended up here.
what's that?
That's how I ended up here.
Oh. Well, anyways, yeah. But yeah, it's like it's a weird attack path, but this is a perfect like user training opportunity, I think. And also just like again going back to like watching for techniques and stuff, like even if you can't find a detection or a user accidentally does click on this, typically the threat actors are doing things after the fact to get access to that computer, so they'll probably be telling people to run a particular exe, or I guess even the vuln itself was just running that exe, so they're gonna get access to the machine, and then what they do after that is usually easily detectable, even if this initial access is not.
Yeah, because you're not going to be able to, you don't want to report on and detect on every single meeting link that's clicked either.
Right.
Especially if this is not like a super, I don't see this like gaining in popularity as like an attack trend. So yeah, what Jake said, there's always something that's going to come after this of what they're trying to do. Like watch for your WebEx client spawning PowerShell, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is one of those things that, like you said, it's not something that I could see like taking over like wildfire, even in this article. So there's no like public or there's no known exploits of it. This just seems like one of those things that's going to be in a toolbox for somebody to try and use at some point. And you might not see it blow up all of a sudden, but this is just going to be someone that it's like, I need to get access to the environment. Let me see if this works. And they're going to try it out once and maybe it will.
So the mitigation here, have a company policy, no agenda, no meeting. That should really take care of it, right? No.
Yeah.
No, I think user training is going to be the best way to address, because like you said, that's not going to be something that folks should be doing as a regular course of action anyway.
Yeah, and even like I've heard good success stories of just like finding reasons to get in front of like your users. And this doesn't have to be like a crazy long, like hour-long seminar of like user training to avoid Cisco like WebEx invitations. This can just be a very small like email or like a quick little like maybe you're tacked on to an existing like company meeting for 5 minutes just saying like here's what I'm seeing in the world of security and like here's the things to be aware of as a user. It doesn't need to be, you don't have to like sit down and like explain to everybody exactly everything, and it gets people seeing your face more often and used to getting that like regular feed of new data. It doesn't need to be like such a formal like sit down.
And,
Oh,
and
I was just gonna
definitely,
say you're landing on one of my favorite soapboxes there, that if you want security to be a priority in the business, you need to be having people talk about it, not just when they are investigating an incident, like during company updates, like bringing that up to the team, letting them know how you're doing, and giving them that information that's going to be relevant for their lives, not just at work, are some good ways to help build that stronger relationship. Sorry, Nick, you were saying something there.
I was just going to add on and say that user training is the biggest part of this, but there are tools that do check links and open sandboxes and see what links are doing. I know Defender has this capability now. FireEye and shout out Barracuda. I used to work there. Their email service does it as well. So you can implore tools to stop this stuff.
Let's see. We are starting to run short on time. We had this story about SSL.com scrambling to patch a certificate issuance vulnerability. This was a attack that was incorrectly marking the host name of an approver's email address as a verified domain. So if someone had a email address from a given host name, while this was in place and it has been remedied now, they were able to request that certificate from the approvers list. I mainly pulled this, and I want to just quickly touch on this because I do want to make sure we get to the other two stories. But what is domain control validation, and why is it important? Because this was a DCV exploit of one of kind of the common base requirements used to validate.
Yeah, so I can go into that a little bit. So DCV, domain control validation, it's used by certificate authorities, which are the companies we trust to craft these certificates, and we rely on them to basically be that source of trust. And these DCVs are they're used by CAs to verify that the person or organization requesting a certificate actually has the control over the domain they want the certificate for. So the thing that confused me about this article originally was like, because I knew that like doing like SSL certs in the past before, like you need to do that step in order for them to verify that you have some kind of control over the domain. And I was like, how did he get access to this email domain, this Ali Yoon email address? And it was so funny because they say there's an attached Bugzilla report where they kind of like detail what happened. And Ali Yoon, I guess, is just they're an email provider as part of one of their services. So it's kind of like it's similar to Yahoo or Gmail or iCloud. So it's any of one of us using one of our Gmail accounts to add on and like become somebody who can start sending out like creating certs for this domain, which is insane. But that was one thing that confused me that I wanted to make sure everybody else was cleared up as well. This Aliyun is also an email provider, which is how this threat researcher was able to grab an email with that domain.
Our penultimate, second to last story this week. I thought this was interesting because it just came up in another context last week. Last week, we had Mike on talking about giving a tip to search your productivity apps, search your Google Drive, search your OneDrive for instances of the word password appearing in files to find folks that may be jotting things down in an insecure place. This week, we had some research come out about what happens to ransomware ransoms if the attackers find insurance or policy mentioned in your files. You can probably guess it goes up a lot. It goes up 2.8 times when attackers are reasonably certain that cyber insurance is detected. And double extortion attacks, so you're getting ransom for your data, and then after paying for that data, they're ransoming you again to not blackmail you by putting that out in the public or leaking that data. Those demands increased almost 6 times, 5.5 times over. And then they found in this research that insured victims paid 44% of the time versus 24% for uninsured victims. So there's certainly some methodology or reasoning behind why attackers are doing that. It was one thing that I thought was interesting here was only 40% of attacks were reported to police, and orgs without good backup systems were 27 times more likely to. Oh, sorry. Orgs with good backup systems were 27 times less likely. It's the week before RSA. I'm so sorry, everyone. To pay the ransom. And alongside that, they said 85% of backups fail to work properly when they're actually needed. So it's a good reminder to not just make backups, but actively test them as well. First point to discuss here, how do you balance the safeguard of having insurance coverage with the risk of a larger demand if coverage is known? I mean, I think that starts with don't put insurance documents in the general org file share is a good first step.
Yeah,
Don't
that was
document insurance.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. That's
That was kind of like one of the things I wrote about in my notes here was you like don't pass on this insurance, but at the same time don't advertise that you have it. It should be part of your policies and procedures as a company that like you have it documented somewhere. But policies and procedures is like a need to know thing. You can have it separated out by permissions as well. Only people who need to know the certain kind of stuff get access to these docs, like you're saying, Zoe. Don't just put it in a random like IT share on the network somewhere. And also like an important thing is educate. This is gonna be another educate users. Educate users on handling those docs and topics like this. Most people just don't know what they should or shouldn't talk about. And that you can see examples of that, like if anybody's ever watched like DEF CON, voicemail, like phishing attacks, like doing vishing capture the flag. A lot of these people call up these companies to try and get like information from whoever they're calling, and a lot of times they get it only because the people they're calling just have never been told to not talk about that information. They don't know
right.
that it actually should be safeguarded.
We've got time for one more today. Going back to that story about the Erlang vulnerability, there's a research coming out by Matthew Keeley showing how AI models have been leveraged to create working exploits for vulnerabilities, sometimes within hours of their announcement. He created a working exploit using a combination of Claude and ChatGPT. For that previously announced vulnerability over the course of an afternoon, that model was able to understand the CVE description, identify which commit introduced a fix, compared the old versus the patched code to locate the vulnerability, then write a proof of concept exploit, and even debug and fix some issues with the initial attempt. Um, so this is like part going back to that thing that we're seeing a acceleration between announcement of a vulnerability and oftentimes public disclosure of an exploit. What can orgs do to try and accelerate their own patching processes or try to respond to that acceleration and stay prepared?
I want to say automated patching, but boy, is that not super easy or possible in many solutions or situations.
Yeah.
I think one thing that is often overlooked is just having. I come from a compliance background, so I love having policies around everything. But this is another thing where it's like if you don't talk about it or you don't have a process or established procedure, it's hard to even like start to tackle the problem. So I would say just like establish a process and a procedure for patching, with special consideration of critical patches, because like if you don't even have a basic like patching schedule, you can't begin to understand like what qualifies as something that's critical. Like you need to have a policy around it because as these things come in, you need to understand if your company's affected by it, if your customers are affected by it, what does it mean if you don't patch it? Are there workarounds? Like there's a whole conversation that needs to be had around when these critical things come out. And then from there you can kind of figure out how you're going to respond to it. And also I want to say like on top of those policies and procedures and processes that you should be getting going, you should also be practicing these things. You should be tabletopping, get everyone on the same page. There's a million examples of these critical patches that need to go out. Just pick one that like affects your company, or even make one up. Who knows that tomorrow is something is going to come out for some critical application that you have that needs to be patched immediately. Like it's easy to tabletop this stuff, and like when you tabletop it, it gets it out of just written words, and people start to practice it, and then you start to also find holes in the process that can make it better as well. So that would be my first thing to say is like have a procedure and also practice it and make sure everybody understands it.
Yeah, I would say a big struggle is to stay up to date on these vulnerabilities since they're coming out so often. But I did take a look at the Erlang GitHub, and they actually posted about this exploit or vulnerability rather almost immediately. So trying to understand like what you're hosting in your infrastructure and looking at like those GitHubs, mailing lists, security advisories, and just trying to stay up to date and reading pretty much on a daily basis, just to try and patch as quickly as possible.
Well, that is going to run us up to our time for this week. Thank you, Jake, Amanda, and Nick, as always, for joining and sharing some of your expertise. Thank you to everyone watching. We hope that this is relevant and helping to inform your practice, especially if you are getting more to do than time to do it. Let us know in the comments if there's another story that you'd like to see us cover. Well, I guess not next week's episode. So I guess just wish us good luck to survive the next week. And then we'll be back the following. Until then, thanks for watching and stay safe out there, everybody. Bye-bye.